Welcome to Cogito Design, the video series where we take a deep dive into the world of tabletop game creation. This is part 2 of a video which is attempting to answer this question: how can tabletop game designers effectively embed moral decisions into their games? In part 1, I looked at how this has been done in the past, and why some of these worked and some did not, specifically discussing the importance of including permanence and player agency when designing games. This video will explore how developers can build on this history to embed even more impactful moral decisions into their games. We've seen that the inclusion of nuanced moral decisions can be a tremendous asset to game designers, and that to use them effectively can be helpful by adding permanence and agency to the gameplay. But the next step is to understand how to create engaging ethical dilemmas, which will leave players pondering deeply about what the correct decision was, perhaps even long after the game has ended. To do this, we need to delve a little into the philosophy of ethics itself. A fundamental question within this branch of philosophy is this: what exactly is it that makes something right and wrong? A fairly simple question, but, and spoiler alert for those of you intending to study philosophy, it's also one that humanity has still not yet been able to answer, although several interesting suggestions have been put forward. The first and most common answer to this question is that we should judge the morality of decisions based on the consequences of that decision. US philosopher and neuroscientist Sam Harris argues that morality is, at base, merely a concern for the well-being of conscious creatures. Actions which increase this well-being are objectively good, and those that decrease it are bad.
But values are a certain kind of fact. They are facts about the well-being of conscious creatures.
This idea is similar to an older concept by the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham, pictured here in his final resting place, in a cupboard behind a glass display in the halls of University College London. You may also notice that his head has been detached and is now sitting between his legs. There is a, possibly apocryphal tale that this is down to students in the 90s from the rival university King's College London, decapitating his corpse and briefly stealing the head as a prank, which as far as pranks go is a little on the extreme side. Bentham believed that morality is entirely based on consequences, and that when deliberating between two courses of action, one should simply choose the action which maximises happiness and minimises pain. His most enduring quote is this: "The greatest happiness of the greatest number is the foundation of morals and legislation." From a game perspective, a key learning point of this philosophy is that games which implement morality well are those which give the players a sense of realism. Some may ask that as games are inherently fictional affairs, will we ever truly care about our decisions when we know the characters involved don't really exist? Evidence for this point would be some Eurogames, where the theme may be largely irrelevant. This is also particularly true for abstract games like chess. Do we ever feel a sense of guilt for the murder of a sweet innocent pawn? No, we don't. We kill them mercilessly and guilt-free, because the theme and mechanics do not embed us in a war. We do not see the taking of a pawn as a moral act, it is merely a strategic one. However, if we are playing a game like Gloomhaven, Seventh Continent, or This War of Mine, the theme is such a key part of the game we simply wouldn't be playing it if we hadn't bought into it in some way. We do care deeply about the lives of fictional characters, otherwise the trials and tribulations of characters in books, movies and TV shows would have no impact on us at all. Philosophically, there are distinct problems with this consequentialist approach. Firstly, a morality which places value solely on the consequences of actions completely negates the intention of the moral agent taking the action. Take two hypothetical players playing Carcassonne. Bob is losing. He does not like to lose and so hits on a plan. He secretly takes 2 tiles each turn and chooses the best one to play. Bob wins the game. Now meet Susan. She is also playing Carcassonne and, failing to understand the rules of the game, draws 2 tiles each turn and picks the best. She also wins the game, but her mistake was made accidentally. For Bob and Susan, the consequences of their actions are identical, but morally most judge the two differently based on their intentions. This seems to suggest that consequences are not the whole story when it comes to ethics, yet the huge influence of the consequentialist approach can be demonstrated when we look at the legal system. In the UK and many other countries, we have different punishments for attempted murder and actual murder. Should we? The intention is the same in both cases. Should you be punished less harshly simply because you failed in your murderous plan? It's an interesting question, but perhaps not the most relevant to game design. There is, however, another problem with the consequentialist approach to ethics, which is potentially very useful to game designers. This is the concept of deontology, championed by philosophers such as Immanuel Kant. Essentially, deontology in ethics is the idea that actions are inherently good and bad in themselves, and that therefore consequences are never morally relevant. There are reasons to suspect this may sometimes be a better approach. A philosophy which focuses entirely on the outcome of an action can condone some pretty heinous acts. If consequences are all that matter, then the ends will always justify the means.
Here's a scenario. You have the power to cure all the world's diseases, but the price for this is that you must kill a single innocent child. Could you kill that child, Stanley?
Nope.
You disappoint me.
Developers aiming to create interesting moral decisions in their games would be wise to capitalise on this consequentialist versus deontological ethical blurring. Decisions where the consequences are heavily weighted on one side, yet the action itself seems abhorrent, force us to confront our views on this mutually exclusive dichotomy. It makes us weigh up what our own values are, which is the essence of an interesting moral choice. Another great method to create powerful moral dilemmas lies in the work of philosopher and moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Haidt suggests that human beings are born with a series of innate moral foundations. However, the extent to which we associate with these foundations varies from person to person based on their experiences and individual dispositions. Consider taste buds for analogy. We all have the same 5 taste buds registering sweet, salt, bitter, sour, and umami flavours, and yet food preferences vary hugely from person to person and culture to culture. That is because, whilst the type of taste buds we have are fixed, the amount of each flavour we enjoy is malleable. Similarly, we all share the same moral taste buds, but as people and cultures grow and evolve, our focus and level of association with each of these taste buds can vary. Haidt suggests that the best candidates for these moral taste buds would be the following: minimising harm, maximising fairness, obeying authority, personifying loyalty, creating liberty, and maintaining purity. This is an immensely useful concept for those hoping to create engaging moral dilemmas, as we can simply put these foundations up against each other in new and engaging ways. The famous trolley dilemma we discussed in part 1 puts the consequentialist against the deontological. A runaway train is headed for 5 workers on a track. You have the ability to stop it by switching the train to another track, but there is another worker on this track as well. Most people will focus on the consequences here, choosing to save the 5 and sacrifice the 1. Now imagine this exact dilemma again, only this time the 6th individual on their own track is no longer a stranger to you, but someone you know and care deeply about. Would you still be tempted to pull the lever and switch the tracks? This change adds a new foundation to the mix. It puts our desire to minimise harm against our belief that we should protect those we owe loyalty to, and thus a complex and interesting dilemma is born. To answer this question, you really do need to decide where your values truly lie. Finally, before implementing moral decisions into their games, developers have one important question to ask themselves. Do they want to persuade or provoke? Do you want to convince the player of a particular moral point of view, or do they want their players to examine their own values and beliefs through the game mechanics? If aiming for the former, then meaningful and difficult moral choices may not actually be the right move. Many games have a specific viewpoint which they are trying to persuade their players towards. If this is the aim of a game, then genuine moral decision is often a less powerful tool than creating complicity through recontextualization. In the video game Spec Ops: The Line, you are tasked with bombing Dubai with white phosphorus, with the image of your victim suitably obscured by the fighter jet's opaque viewfinder. Then, in the next mission, you are on the ground and see the horrific reality of what you have done. This is not an ethical dilemma, but a powerful moral statement about the realities of war. To have given the player the option not to bomb the city would have defeated the point of the game. On the tabletop, we can see a similar example in Monopoly, or rather in its original form, the Landlord's Game. This game was designed to warn people about the perils of unrestricted capitalism through a set of mechanics which inevitably, over time, force all the wealth and property in the game to reside with just one player. Conversely, if a developer's aim is not to persuade the player to a particular point of view, but instead to recognise the player as a unique moral agent in their own right, then the moral choices should be as free and difficult as humanly possible, allowing the player to make their own decisions and to live with the consequences. This war of mind doesn't punish you for not following the designer's own ethical values, it allows you to explore your own morality through the game itself. Miquel Sicart, author of The Ethics of Computer Games, argues for this second type of game. The ethical game is not one that evaluates player morality, but one that allows reflection. Ethics is at the centre of nearly all the major and most interesting decisions we make, and the decisions themselves are a key insight to our values and those of the people around us. This is something, therefore, that we can and must utilise more in our games. Whether it is done in the theme or the mechanics, or preferably both, if done well, it will certainly enhance gameplay and the experience of players. Our values are a huge part of what defines us as individuals, and a key connection to those around us. The great advantage of tabletop games is that they allow you to play directly with a real person sitting in front of you. Times where we get to tap into these values and to consider them more deeply are times where we get to know our family and friends at a deeper level, and, in essence, they may be the most interesting choices that we ever have to make.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.
This week we are so excited because we have a new patron, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome. We are so chuffed, and we just want to say thank you to all our patrons and those of you who are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, we really appreciate your support.
If you are liking our content so far, please head to Patreon to find out what we offer. Bye!